Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into a deeply fascinating philosophical reinterpretation of traditional beliefs. And honestly, it challenges pretty much everything we think we know about spirituality. We're going to break down some really thought-provoking source material that looks at faith through a very modern, intellectual lens. And the whole thing starts with a stark, unavoidable reality: the massive wave of young people who are just completely walking away from organized religion.
Here is a quick roadmap of what we'll be covering today. 1. The youth religion exodus. 2. Blind faith versus true religion. 3. People over ghosts. 4. Public versus private spirits. 5. The true meaning of Buddha. And finally, 6. Teachers, mentors, and masters.
Let's start with Section 1, the youth religion exodus, a demographic shift away from tradition.
The sheer volume of this exodus is honestly staggering. The source material points to modern surveys showing a massive decline in religious affiliation. Roughly 6 out of 10 people overall say they have no religion. But when you look at the youth, it's wild. A staggering 76% of people in their 20s and 71% of people in their 30s identify as non-religious. We're talking about a society where distancing yourself from traditional religion isn't just a trend anymore, it's the overwhelming norm.
So naturally, institutions are kind of panicking, right? They're trying desperately to adapt. The source highlights how religious venues are pivoting hard to secular appeal. You've got cathedrals marketing themselves as aesthetic wedding hotspots. We're even seeing temples hosting popular dating programs like I Am Solo, which, surprisingly, matched 69 couples in just 2 years. But here's the core argument from our source. These superficial, trendy adaptations completely miss the mark. Treating religious holidays like mere public events or hosting dating shows ignores the much deeper intellectual awakening that's actually driving young people away in the first place.
Moving on to Section 2, blind faith versus true religion, dismantling established concepts.
The source uses Socratic questioning to really challenge the status quo here. Just think about this quote for a second. If these divine figures and teachings have supposedly been guiding us for thousands of years, why does the world still look like this? Why is there still so much hardship? The speaker argues that we only accept these traditional labels, calling things holy or divine, because we were basically commanded to during a historical era of ignorance. We didn't know any better back then, so we just blindly accepted the packaging.
Now here is where we get to a crucial dichotomy between two concepts we usually treat as the exact same thing. The speaker explicitly redefines faith as an outdated survival mechanism. Faith was what we relied on when we were weak, poor, and uneducated, basically begging unseen forces for help. Religion, on the other hand, in its truest and highest sense, means receiving a great teaching to achieve actual intellectual growth. So it's about education, not begging.
In fact, the source doesn't sugarcoat this at all. It argues that clinging to the old ways of faith, kneeling and begging for divine intervention, actually goes completely against the natural order of our modern, intellectually mature society. We aren't in an era of ignorance anymore, so if you keep relying on blind faith today, the source argues it will lead to guaranteed hardship. You simply can't use an ancient survival tool in a knowledge-based world and expect to thrive.
That brings us to Section 3, people over ghosts. A radical shift in focus.
This perfectly illustrates the source's core frustration with modern spiritual practices. You've got people spending hours kneeling, bowing, and making offerings to invisible spirits or ghosts, desperately trying to secure some good fortune. And yet, those exact same people will turn around and engage in petty power struggles and fights with the actual, living human beings standing right in front of them. It's a massive misallocation of energy.
So, what are the modern rules of engagement? According to the source, they're profoundly human-centric. We live in an era strictly defined by human-to-human interaction. As educated individuals, we shouldn't be begging spirits for help, we should be cultivating the intellectual power to actually help them. The big takeaway here is super practical. If you want to prevent hardship in your life, you don't need a magical ritual, you need to master human relationships. If you treat the people right in front of you well, the difficulties in your life will naturally disappear.
Let's look at Section 4. Public versus private spirits, the hierarchy of the afterlife.
The speaker presents a pretty firm, impartial classification of spirits here, and it isn't based on how many prayers you said in your life, but entirely on how you lived. On one side, we have private spirits. These are people who lived entirely for themselves or purely for their immediate biological families, just focused inward. On the other side, we have public spirits. These are individuals who lived for the greater good, contributed to society, and left a positive public legacy behind.
The ultimate goal here is that as educated individuals, we absolutely must actively build public merit. Why? Because if you die as a private spirit, you become tethered. You return as this burdensome, attached spirit clinging to your own descendants, unable to truly transcend because your focus was just entirely selfish. To achieve real spiritual liberation, you've got to live as a public contributor while you're here in the physical world.
Moving on to Section 5, the true meaning of Buddha, redefining the Enlightened One.
The source completely redefines the term Buddha here. It's not an idol to be worshipped, and it's certainly not some untouchable deity. According to the text, a Buddha is simply a conceptual guide. It's a teacher who takes someone who is lost, confused, or ignorant and helps them find their way. That's really it. It's an active, grounded role of education and guidance.
Logically, this means there isn't just one Buddha. There are actually many Buddhas, all at varying levels of impact. So what makes someone a great Buddha? It's someone whose teachings are so profoundly helpful that they continuously benefit society long after they're gone, across multiple generations. The source also points out a really fascinating historical limitation. Back in the day, people traveled by horse or cow, right? They didn't have the internet or massive ships. So past teachers could only ever be local or regional. But today, the potential to leave a massive, global, lasting teaching is greater than ever before. So the real question becomes, how do we reach that incredible level of societal contribution? How do we grow into people capable of leaving a lasting public legacy?
That brings us to our final section, Section 6, Teachers, Mentors, and Masters, the Path of Intellectual Growth.
This timeline perfectly maps out the developmental hierarchy for a human life, broken down into 3 distinct stages. First, we have the childhood era, where we rely on teachers to learn the basic fundamentals of how the world works. Then, we enter the social growth era. Once we step into society, a basic teacher isn't enough anymore. We need mentors to teach us how to actually navigate relationships and societal structures. Finally, once we've absorbed all we can from society and become fully grown adults, we reach the final stage. To achieve ultimate intellectual maturity and transcend, we must seek out a true master.
As we wrap up this explainer, I really want to leave you with a provocative thought straight from the core of the source material. We aren't living in an age of blind faith anymore, where we can just beg the unseen for favors. We are in an era that absolutely demands intellectual growth, harmonious human relationships, and real public contribution. So look at the life you're living right now. Look at the people you interact with and the legacy you're building. Ask yourself, are you living just for yourself or for the greater good? What kind of spirit are you preparing to become? Thanks for joining me on this deep dive, and keep reflecting on your own journey of growth.